Welcome to Creekside Chats with Successful Real Estate Investors, brought to you by Steve Talker Capital, promoting prosperity and harmony to help you flourish in all areas of life. Join in as we explore the motivations and goals of real estate investors and how their ability to invest abundantly has provided them with the time and freedom to contribute to the world in a creative and thoughtful way. Now please welcome your host, Dr. Allen.
Hello, enlightened investors. Happy to be back with you again today. I'm your host, Dr. Allen. Today's show is the second to the last show for Creekside Chats. Yes, we are shutting down Creekside Chats. We're moving to a new show entitled Real Estate Investing Abundance. The new show will continue to bring you our guests' personal stories of inspiration, but they will also bring to us their pertinent investment expertise and insights. On June 14th, you'll find us for our premiere show at Real Estate Investing Abundance. I look forward to meeting you there. Today's guest is a true Renaissance man with a broad range of interests and pursuits. He speaks 5 languages, enjoys snowboarding, dancing, salsa, playing soccer, and has completed 10 full marathons. He holds a Bachelor's of Science in Computer Sciences, a Master's in Liberal Arts, and an MBA from University of Chicago Booth School of Business. Our guest brings us a wealth of insights and well-grounded inspiration. Like many active real estate investors, he began his real estate investing career the hard way. 15 years ago, he began purchasing single-family and 4 or less multifamily homes and accumulated over 200 units. In the last few years, he transformed his real estate investment business to focus on larger multifamily complexes. To achieve financial freedom, he applied the principles of the cash flow formula. He now teaches and coaches others to apply the same principles to their lives. Welcome to the show, David Kamara. David, share with us a memorable experience from your formative years that as you look back and you go, yeah, that was something that helped to make me the person that I am today.
First, thank you, Alan, for having me on your show. I'm a big fan. And in terms of a memorable event in my childhood, there's a few. So I was born in the former Soviet Union. My dad was studying there. My dad is from West Africa. My dad's from Sierra Leone. And my mother's Ukrainian. And growing up in Ukraine, it was a very interesting experience because it was a very homogeneous. There weren't a lot of kids that looked like me, much less so than there are in the United States for sure. I knew that, but I always was very okay with it. And I spoke the language very well. We lived there till I was just after 7 years old. So I started my first year of schooling. My first language was Russian. My first language in school, my first year in school was Ukrainian with Russian and English as foreign languages. And then when my dad finished, we moved to West Africa, to Sierra Leone. So one of the, I think, memorable and formative experiences was leaving Ukraine and moving to West Africa. I had visited before as a kid, but it was definitely difficult for a 7-year-old to move to an entirely different continent, different culture, different food, different climate, different language. And I missed my friends a lot, but also for the first month or so that we were there, I wasn't enrolled in school. We were still trying to figure out what school I would go to. So that experience was very, I would say, formative in that it pushed me to adapt early. It made me learn to roll with what you had. And again, I knew the whole time growing up that, yes, my dad was going to be finishing his studies and we're moving to this country, which experience was wonderful and really loved it. But I think just a lot of people don't move around. And I think, in fact, if you look at folks that are very resilient, I think you do see that theme of as they were growing up, they had to move from place to place and learn to make new friends, learn to adapt to the new situations. And I think that's very meaningful. And the other thing that it was just fortunate is that I got to be exposed to a lot of different cultures and languages growing up. So again, I think that's helpful in child development. And not that I've used my languages necessarily a lot to my advantage that I could point to, but I always have cherished the fact that the language is culture and culture often sets the tone for how people live. So I was exposed to that early. So I was very fortunate for that.
David, that is quite a story. What an unusual life and certainly an unusual beginning for a child. A Ukrainian and Sierra Leone marrying together. I'm sure there's a story there as well, but today we're really focused on you. But tell us just a little bit about that. How in the world did your parents get together?
Yeah, so I think the backstory there is a little bit of the kind of ideological battle during the Cold War between East and West. And my dad essentially was the beneficiary of a scholarship to go study in the former Soviet Union. And there were not too many, but a few students from Africa, very parts of Africa, some from Sierra Leone in Kiev, which is where we lived, in the capital of Ukraine. And actually, when we came back to Sierra Leone, there was a small kind of community of women that married Sierra Leoneans when they were studying. So it's a very interesting subculture even there. But I guess I grew up as in Ukraine, I was the dark-skinned kid, and then in Sierra Leone, I was the light-skinned kid. And it was always fun being the chameleon and being able to merge here and there. And again, especially when you open your mouth and you speak the language fluently, you very quickly realize that people accept you because you speak their language, and it's just kind of surprising for them. And I still get a kick out of showing out where people don't exactly know my background and hearing them speak one language or the other and just surprising them with no accent and kind of becoming friends very quickly. But just, I guess, maybe to take that story a little bit further, another very formative experience, and maybe this leads into some other things that are relevant. We had a set of military coups in Sierra Leone while I was growing up. And again, it was a happy childhood. The country is known for wonderful beaches. You can basically spend your whole life there in a shorts and a t-shirt because it's always warm, and eat mangoes and bananas off trees and just hang out with friends and play soccer on the streets. But unfortunately, we had this kind of civil unrest due to the fact that the country had natural resources. And so one was faced with reality very early in life, where you saw, first of all, there's great disparity in just I would say, wealth, right, in the country. You have some people that have next to nothing, and you have some people that are extremely wealthy. And especially during the political turmoil and unrest, you see here and see documentaries on Netflix about child soldiers. I saw those like in front of me, kids that were my age toting AK-47s and doing crazy things. And frankly, what helped us was the fact that my dad was a medical doctor. So my dad, again, this is a country where there is no health insurance. So we had a clinic in our house, and my dad would take care of people whether they had money or not, and whether they could afford to pay or not. And my goal growing up was always to become a doctor. So at clinic, I was assisting my dad, taking care of patients during regular times, but also during war times, dressing wounds, bullet wounds, extracting bullets, but also performing surgery. And at 17, I actually did an appendectomy with my dad assisting, and this would never happen anywhere else. But again, my dad made sure everything was fine. And it's kind of like an apprenticeship model, right? There's not a lot of doctors per population there. So you do what you can and you help people as you can. But back to the original point I was trying to make was, when these rebels came to town, right, a lot of them, this was not a strife along ethnic or religious groups. This was, okay, these people are fighting for something they believe in, and they recruited people widely from the local community. So some of the local folks who we had helped, who my dad had helped, essentially told the rebels not to hurt our family because, hey, this person, my dad, was actually a person who helped take care of everybody, regardless of what their status was and whether they could or could not afford the medical care. So that was very eye-opening, inspirational, and just good, right? It just made me feel like my dad was making a difference in the local community.
You've explained it, but I was wondering how you rode the tide of all of those political upheavals from one side to the other, and how your family survived all that. But you explained that it was because of the work that your dad did and the fact that he was a physician and helped people on whoever side they were on there. Enlightened investors, are you passionate about the work of your calling but have little time to develop a passive investment portfolio to secure your future? Even though you are blessed to work in your calling, would you like to have financial freedom to live more abundantly in all areas of life? If this is you, visit us at steedtucker.com. There you'll find free information on predictable, reliable, and passive real estate investing so you can develop financial independence for abundant living. While there, you can schedule a 30-minute phone call to talk with me about anything you'd like, or if you'd rather, send me an email at alan@steedtucker.com. I look forward to meeting and connecting with you. At some point in time, you transitioned over here to the United States, and rather than going into the medical field, you went into the IT field. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there's a story in there I can probably abbreviate. The quick version of it is, and again, another formative experience. The plan was always to finish high school in Sierra Leone and go to university outside of Sierra Leone. We had a family friend slash uncle, really a relative in Germany. And the plan was for me to go study medicine in Germany. About 2 months before we graduated high school, we had another coup, which was frankly more bloody than the ones we had before and very disruptive. We had just had an election 9 months prior to that, which was declared free and fair by the international observers. And here again was this coup ousting the government that had just been elected. So there was an embargo declared on the country. And long story short, everybody who could leave left. All the professional class kind of left and moved to the neighboring country, which is Guinea. These are very small countries, so it's like moving from one state to the other. So I live in Michigan right now. It'd be the equivalent of driving from Detroit to Chicago. It's like a 3 to 4 hour drive, and you're in a different country, different language, different barriers, different money, everything. So we waited it out. And so our exams were being graded in the UK. They couldn't send those papers out. One of my best friends from school happened to have, their family had a green card, and they were evacuated by the US Marines at the time, and they came to the United States. We stayed and then tried to see if the situation would pass. Didn't. Went to Guinea and tried to get me a visa to go to Germany from Guinea. This was just a time of mass exodus, and so many people had moved to Guinea, and literally you'd walk on the streets of Conakry and you'd just see your friends from Sierra Leone. Like most people were there trying to make it out to go somewhere else, mostly Europe and the United States. So the embassies were full, right? This is a situation. Embassies and consular sections typically work limited hours. So the German embassy was Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 9 to midday. So 3 hours a day. So you show up and there's a line stretching around the block. And we later found out that the locals would actually sleep in line and then sell their spot to whoever could afford to buy it from them. Needless to say, it took a while to get to that interview. We finally did. And I said, I'm going to Germany to study. Because of that, they actually told me that I needed to speak the language. I needed to show some German language proficiency, as opposed to most of the other folks who were just going for a visit who actually got their visas. So we walked out of the embassy dejected, and we met a friend literally like 2 hours after we walked out of the embassy who was Sierra Leonean, had studied in Germany. His wife was German, and he's okay, so what are you guys doing? We told him, I'm trying to now learn German so I can go and take this interview. So literally he's like, I don't have anything else going on, at least a month. So I spent some time with him, I think for 3 weeks, doing a German intensive colloquial practice, and then went back for the interview and passed it. They said, this is great. We now have to send your documents to, I think it was Bonn, and it'll probably take about 6 weeks. So sit tight. So of course, this is a cash economy, right? And you don't have the war situation. So people don't have you don't have credit, and there wasn't a ton of cash. So we had to downgrade our hotel and try to stay somewhere more affordable where we could extend our stay. In the meantime, we said, there's a US embassy across the street here. Why don't we see what happens there? So then I contacted my friend who had come to the States and essentially explained the situation. And they said, yeah, if you can make it over to the States, we'll help you settle down and go to school. And that was essentially what ended up happening. So that's how I ended up in Michigan, and very grateful to that family. We're still really close and great friends. But yes, so this was one of those unexpected events in life that was very formative and one couldn't predict, but ended up happening and worked out very well.
And so you've been in the States ever since and have been through really a number of transitions, even here in the States. One transition I am interested in is that you have a master's in liberal arts from the University of Chicago, and you also have an MBA from the University of Chicago. The University of Chicago Business School is not just any business school, but it is not a business school that one would think of having any kind of intersectionality with the liberal arts. In fact, it would be just the opposite. Tell me about that intersectionality that you found between liberal arts and the business school at the University of Chicago.
So I think to give you the full picture, I think I should take a step back too, and I'll be brief. So when I got to the States, I enrolled in community college, and finally, years later, our results from our high school or advanced level secondary school in England, in Sierra Leone, which was being graded in England. Those grades came through, and I think I received like 36 credits that transferred to university level. But this was before anyone acknowledged that. So I was at college and I was applying for scholarships because I came here by myself. My parents were still back in Sierra Leone, didn't really have money, and was trying to see how to make it and how to go to college. So community college was fine. I was able to work because there was a temporary protected status issued for Sierra Leoneans because of the situation there politically. But at Henry Ford Community College in Dearborn, I ended up taking a lot of classes in liberal arts because I enjoyed those classes. I really liked it. My background in Sierra Leone in school was mostly science. And again, like I said, a lot of the science courses I had taken, because I'd taken the A-levels version of them, gave me advanced placement and got me to skip a number of classes. So I had to get into like calculus 2 and things like that. So that really opened my eyes to a lot of these other classes, which were really fun and I enjoyed. However, when I ended up transferring to the University of Michigan, it was much more expensive. So I had to focus on finishing my degree. Originally, I started with doing biochemistry and computer science with the intent of still maintaining the dreams of becoming a doctor somehow. Quickly realized how expensive it would be to be a doctor as a foreign student. So then I focused more on computer science and literally got my credits to get my graduation in 4 semesters and was done. So I then got a job in Chicago for a very, very interesting company, McMaster-Carr, that was just a great place to learn both business, but also they had a tremendous program where they would allow you to take classes at any accredited institution. So this is when I enrolled at the Masters of Liberal Arts program at the University of Chicago, because I could do it on a part-time basis while I was working. And it truly was a great period of learning because the professors were just wonderful. I remember I had a book on my shelf and it was like the edited works of Shakespeare. And I looked at who edited those works, and it was actually the professor whose class I was taking. It was just so random. David Bevington, I remember it still. But so it was just a time of great discovery and debate with interesting people. And I really had a good time doing that. After I finished that degree, then I really was thinking, okay, this is good, but there's also this wonderful business school here. And actually applied to both Kellogg and the University of Chicago, and ended up going to the University of Chicago. I just loved the discipline. I think liberal arts is great. And I think more people should have a liberal arts education because it really teaches you to think and ponder the difficult questions in life. So I was very grateful to be able to be part of that experience.
Let's bring this back around to your real estate experience. You, like many people, you started out with a duplex and you gradually graduated to larger complexes, and one of your latest transactions was a 95 unit complex. Tell us about your experiences. I think you started back in 2005 and you've gradually moved to the larger units. Tell us a little bit about your real estate career from the first duplex to the 94 unit complex.
Sure. So when I moved to Chicago, we lived in the city in Chicago for a year, and then we decided to buy a house. And just as a foreigner coming to the States, just the idea of being able to leverage and buy a house with, at the time, it was something like 5% down or 10% down, was very intriguing to me. So I just was fascinated by the whole idea. I went to a number of seminars at the time on mostly single family investing, and I convinced my wife that, hey, that we should try this out and we should probably buy something small and maybe rent it and see how it went. So we bought our first duplex in 2006. Worked really well. Was definitely a great learning experience dealing with tenants and just various jurisdictions and how things worked. But for the most part, it worked very well. We were looking at another house in Forest Park where we lived at the time. And interestingly, that house went up for auction. So I ended up attending the auction and winning the bid. So that was a great experience. And then after business school, life took over. We had 2 kids and we ended up moving back to Michigan. We kept the houses in Chicago and Northwest Indiana, but so at the time after business school, I ended up getting a consulting job, a job in management consulting. And it's a pretty demanding job in terms of hours and travel. And it's also a very high earning job, right? So it was an interesting career path and one that my wife and I discussed and said, hey, this may or may not be it for us, but let's try it and see what happens. But we fell off the, I would say, real estate investment train a little bit. And so years later, after I'd left that consulting company and actually started my own and was working for myself and was making even more money, but still traveling a lot, that one evening my daughter said, "Hey, Dad, are you going to work tomorrow?" And really, I understood that the question really was, am I not going to see you for a few days here? And so that was a stinging question that I ended up thinking about for quite some time. And then I came back and spoke to my wife about it. I said, "Hey, this real estate thing we've been doing, it's working. Maybe we should consider it more seriously because, yeah, I don't want to keep doing this and not see you, my kids. Is the goal here just to travel everywhere and work on interesting things, but really not enjoy my daughters and have spend quality time with my wife?" So that's when we really decided that, yeah, we should take the real estate path a bit more seriously. Let's re-engage on that front, but let's also try to scale up and not do single family because we wanted to be able to scale much faster. The original plan was, hey, maybe we can buy a house a year. Clearly, even if we'd done that, would been enough. Maybe we would have bought, I don't know, 10 houses or something like so. Or I think we had actually like 8 units by then, but still it wasn't fast enough. And we wanted to do it more seriously. So that was the turning point to getting some mentoring and getting some education, because we were at the point where we had the finances to buy something. And I was fairly confident that I could figure it out, but I was not sure that I would not make some large mistakes. And I felt like the money spent in getting coaching or getting someone who can advise you was well worth it. And so that's what we did. So we ended up buying we ended up buying 4 buildings for ourselves in very quick succession. And just by my excitement and speaking to people that I've worked with, started getting a lot of questions about, hey, why don't you tell us about this apartment thing that you're doing? Because we're interested and it sounds very fascinating. And it sounds like the returns are valid and frankly, potentially better than what we're getting. And that's when we started having conversations with investors about joining us in some of our projects.
Well, interesting trajectory there. Tell us a little bit about this latest project. You purchased it for about, I think it was 3.7 million, and its current valuation is something a little over 5 million. Tell us what it is that you have done with that project and how it is that you increased the value on that property.
Yeah, so this project was one where it's in a smaller town. It's a college town. It's southwest Michigan, so about 100 miles from Chicago. And it's a 94-unit property. When I looked at it, my broker brought it to me and he said, "Hey, this may be a good one to look at." And this was a broker that I trusted. I'd bought a number of deals from him already. But it was larger than most things that we'd done. And again, it was also more expensive, although not very expensive. It was about as expensive as some of the projects we bought, but again, it was larger numbers. So we ended up first visiting it, and it showed very well. A lot of the units had already been upgraded. There were some minor upgrades to make, but I think most importantly, what convinced us to do that project was it was priced well, considered all of the factors. The sellers actually had bought it just about a year ago when they were before they started to sell it. So there was, I think, some family situation. I'm not sure if it was divorce or some need for funds. And so they essentially said, we're selling it, and they priced it. In fact, it was, I think, one of the only projects ever that we sent in a purchase and sale agreement and they signed it without any edits. You very seldom get that. Most people have some objections or some modifications to make, and literally we received it, and my attorney and I were like, wait, did they just sign just the first draft? So it was pleasantly surprising from that perspective. So I think more than anything, we bought it at the right price, and we underwrote it with a degree of caution, right? In that we estimated slightly high expenses than what they were projecting or what they had done in the first year. We estimated some minor repairs above and beyond what they had done. And we were able to communicate that to investors successfully. And we were fortunate to have, again, mostly I approached people that I had worked with before professionally, people that I'd grown up with, or people that frankly knew me. So people investing primarily in me. There was a high degree of trust. So we closed that deal. And frankly, soon after, we actually had a fire in one of the buildings, which was a massive learning experience. But we also had a very good property management company, a very good property manager. So they were very instrumental in making sure that that was managed well. Luckily, nobody died. Everyone got out of the building successfully. There were no injuries. Definitely a loss of lots of property, and we were able to set up a GoFundMe page to help some of the tenants. But essentially, we discovered that we actually had very good property insurance on the property, and we were able to be covered for that expense and rebuild that unit or that building with 11 units back to being better than what it was. So essentially now have a brand new building. The other reason, so that's just something that happened with the deal, which you don't normally anticipate, right? You buy a property and typically things just slow and surely go forward and make minor changes. The changes that we were able to make on the property were we upgraded a number of the floors to make the property more appealing, for which we were able to raise rents ever so slightly. They were not originally charging the tenants for water, which in that municipality for some reason was extremely expensive. So we didn't pass the full cost of the water bill on tenants, but we essentially gradually said, hey, you're going to pay $30 or whatever it is a month. And people were receptive to that. And then there are a few units on that property. Out of the 94, we had about 6 that are 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, or 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. So I think at one point some of them were originally separate, but then they, for whatever reason, merged them. Others were just originally 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. And again, looking at kind of the economics of what makes sense in that project, we decided to convert those back and separate them to 1 bedroom, 1 bath, and 2 bedroom, 1 baths. And that's still in progress, but that we already have converted some, and it seems to be making a lot of sense. At the same time, cap rates have compressed, and so property values have gone up. So I wouldn't say that all of the increase in value has been due to our good management. We definitely have driven up the net operating income, which is the metric that you look at. But some of it has definitely been due to the fact that it seems, especially right now, post-COVID or during COVID, a lot of real estate investors are migrating from other real estate sub-asset classes, such as hotels and office spaces and retail and restaurants, and really trying to buy properties and communities because they are performing well despite the pandemic. So that has, I think, contributed. So I think one thing to note here, and I'm not sure whether a lot of listeners know this, but some may not. I think the key with multifamily real estate is that it's priced as a business. And the fact that it's priced based on how much profit does it generate, that net operating income. And when you contrast that with single families, you single family houses, you really don't have a lot of control. You're just at the mercy of what is the neighborhood doing, or what's the town doing, how much is the next house across the street worth, or what did it just sell for. So with multifamily, we definitely have the advantage of being more in control of your destiny, so to speak, right? You can, through good management over time, increase rents and generate more revenue. And also you can control the expenses on these properties. So I think a lot of investors, once they say real estate, they automatically think, what happened in the 2008 downturn with single family, it's a risky proposition. I just wanted to contrast that. And even in that downturn, multifamily did so much better than single family. And I think that's well known, published, and documented. But we're not entirely buy and hold and see what happens, more of being disciplined. And again, I bring the consulting and the management consulting kind of discipline to operational improvement and how do we do things better. So that's worked out well for investors.
A number of things that contributed to the increase in value, improvements on the property, tightening up the management, and then also just the cap rates depressing and property values increasing there.
Yeah.
Over the years that you have been involved in real estate investing, you've developed a system that you refer to as personal cash flow formula. Tell us a little bit about that formula and how it is that you share that with individuals in your training programs.
Sure. As I think I've been in management consulting, you're often on projects far away from home and working. It could be anywhere, right? In the middle of the country, on the coast, etc. It's very challenging work, and it kind of forces you to think very analytically. My background is, again, computer science, engineering, and then I have liberal arts, broad view of life and kind of the big picture questions, and then business school kind of hones you on the financial side. So what I was trying to figure out, and this kind of really crystallized when I was in a project in northern Illinois in the cornfields just south of the Wisconsin border. After work, I would do a lot of training and for running for marathon races. So I'd register for these marathon races, and then I'd have a regimen. If I either wake up in the morning and do a long run, or actually do sometimes runs before and after, or like also do work that I needed for the client. But as I was doing these runs, I kind of started thinking, how do I address my financial situation, as well as this question that my daughter was asking, like, hey, are you going to work? And so I really started honing in on really examining the different options for retail investors, right? Where do retail investors put their money? Most people put their money in stocks, but that's not it. There's so many other options. There's cryptocurrency now and Bitcoin. There's go buy a business or a franchise. There's real estate, which I was doing. So I really took a very academic approach and looked at all the different asset classes and all the different returns, and also, more importantly, what's the risk profile of each of those. And so what I really arrived at was, you really want to look at your personal situation like a business, right? In business school, you learn about your financial statements, income statement, balance sheet, cash flow. And so your balance sheet's like your net worth. In a business or on a personal front, your income statement is really what do you make from all sources, your paid job, your Uber driver job, whatever it is that people do to bring in money, babysitting, etc. And then what all your expenses and what's left over. And that what's left over is essentially your cash flow. And you could be more detailed about it, and cash flow can be supplemented by loans, etc. But that's kind of it. So what I really crystallized for myself, and also in conversations with other people that were consultants and other knowledge workers, was if you can essentially have positive cash flow at the end of the year, where you've paid for your essential expenses, home, car, insurance, food, etc., then if you can invest that cash flow well over time, that's what most people do for retirement. But in my case, I wanted it to be more passive, and I wanted to accelerate that. So essentially what I arrived at was, okay, so I need to invest in the most effective asset class that has the highest return with the most or the least risk adjusted, the least risk. And that's what I crystallized as the personal cash flow formula. And again, I have a bent towards real estate. I did do extremely well in stocks, but after a while, I just realized that I was focusing a lot on following these stocks, and you just don't have that much control. Nobody's asking you what if I'm a publicly traded company and you buy my stock, you've got the whims of what I do. And sometimes people do well, but sometimes there's things that you just don't control. The gist of that is what I crystallized in that cash flow formula, the personal cash flow formula in this case. And I'm happy to share that with people. If you actually go on my website, it's capesierracapital.com/cashflow, and you can grab a copy there, and hopefully it's helpful.
So Enlightened Investors, that ebook can be found at capesierracapital.com/cashflow. David, let's move into our final round of questions here, and we have 4 questions for you here. The first is, what is your best piece of advice for the busy professional and successful entrepreneur who is looking for passive real estate investment opportunities?
So that's interestingly a question that I wrote a blog post about. I think it has exactly that title, which is also on my site. But I guess my one piece of advice would be, again, I don't try to drive everyone to any one particular asset class. I think people need to pick the asset class that best suits them and suits their risk tolerance levels and their expectation for return. That said, I think, again, given all of those things we just mentioned, I think real estate is a very good asset class for that. And I think if you're already at that point and you made that decision, I think you need to partner with trust. I think trust is extremely important. There are a lot of very trustworthy and capable people out there to choose from. So I think if you are already in the place in your mind where you know that's where you're gravitating towards, I would just say, spend some time with a number of operators and see who speaks to you. At the end of the day, this is a business that's built on trust, and that's most important.
Excellent advice. What is the worst one thing a novice or even a seasoned professional real estate investor should avoid?
The worst thing they should avoid. I think there's a tendency, especially now or in the past, I would say a year or two, there seems to be a lot of money chasing good deals. So I think one thing to embrace, is the other way to answer the question, is disciplined underwriting. You have to be extremely disciplined about where you think you can deliver the returns you promise your investors. I learned this during that auction for that first house I bought in Forest Park. If you're in the heat of bidding for something, it's a good project, you've done some work on it, you have these projections, and the price slightly keeps getting away from where you thought it was or where you modeled it to be, it's very easy to say, those extra couple points aren't going to make that big of a difference. But at the end of the day, if you don't buy the project, it's very difficult to make it up. So I am of the opinion that it's okay for me to miss the deal. If I feel like it's a stretch, I'd rather pass and wait for another one that I think we can do well at. But I think that's something that I would definitely encourage people to keep an eye on.
It is so tempting to underwrite to the selling price rather than to the correct price for the purchaser there. What question do you wish I had asked you that I have not asked you?
You've asked very good questions, Alan. What questions else? I think we've covered, probably more about me in this interview than most. I guess the one thing that I'd like people to know about me is that I feel that each one of us has something special inside of us. And I think people need to be cognizant about their mindset. And whatever it is that you believe, you're right, right? So whatever you believe, whatever you tell yourself, I was in a place where I was a high income earner and I was not very happy in my life because, again, I was too busy. And so I think having a very critical perspective on your own life is needed and necessary to make some changes if changes are required. I don't think changes are required for everyone, and I wouldn't be the person to say that. But I think if you're in a place where you're telling yourself that I'm doing better than most and I'm happy and I'm making good money and my kids are taken care of and things are not bad, I think that's the operative word. If you're telling yourself things are not bad, then they're not good. And you just have to be honest with yourself. And I think people, especially today, are very enabled and can do anything and can find out all kinds of information. So I think honesty is required, and it's very difficult to be honest with yourself sometimes, especially when you really aren't doing poorly. That's it. That's one thing that I'd say.
Yeah, so many of us are our own worst enemy, and it's taken me a lifetime to learn that. My last question is, imagine that you have lived a rich, meaningful life, and now you are on your deathbed. As you reflect back on your life, what memories fill you with happiness, pride, and satisfaction?
I'm extremely grateful for my family. I'm extremely grateful for my parents, my mother, my father, my wife, my kids. I find tremendous joy just seeing my daughters run around and do fun things and be healthy. And I feel extremely lucky in a way and grateful too. I guess what I would think or what would like people to remember me by is that I truly cared for people. I try to not have 1,000 friends, but the friends that I do have, I try to really care for, or the people that I care for in my life, I am very sincere with. And I think most people that know me would say that. So I'm extremely grateful for where I am in my life at this point. And I'm very happy to have a loving wife, a great kids that are healthy, do well in school and love sports, and to have been supported by my parents and have a loving sister as well. Extremely happy as to things have turned out, and I couldn't complain. It's not been an easy life by any means, but I wouldn't wish it any other way.
David, thank you for joining us on the show today. It has been a true pleasure.
You talked about you have a PhD, I think, in psychology. I'm just curious how you came to this path yourself. And I've listened to a few of your interviews, but if you could fill in that blank, that would be, I think, very helpful.
I started probably like a lot of people did. I started with building my own home in Colorado while I was living in Guam. And I did that for the purpose of having a place to come to when I was here in the States visiting. I built it so that I had a place, the majority of it was rented. I had a room with a kitchen and bath that I could come to when I was here in the States. That worked out well. It gave me a place to come to, and it always rented well. When I got back to the States, I didn't end up in Colorado, so I eventually sold. This was after I moved to Appalachia. I had already purchased my primary residence here in Appalachia and had converted it to a triplex. When I sold the place in Colorado, I did a 1031 exchange on a single family home and then converted it to a triplex. That's where I got started. I then had a mobile home park, and I've done some building of spec homes. A couple of years ago, I started looking into the fact that if I want to have financial independence, I'm going to have to accelerate. I started looking into multifamily and into syndications. That's where I got to today. I still teach psychology.
Awesome.
Yeah. So did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Anything else?
No, so I really like the format of your shows. I think a lot of people's podcasts really dive just into kind of the subject matter. And I think I like your format seems a little bit more about the individual and their life story. And I think that's a very good approach. I think all of us have interesting stories, but it's ultimately what people just do with their challenges that kind of helps them. And I guess I like that format. I really enjoyed listening to the podcast that I've listened to in your show.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I oftentimes wonder if it's something people want to hear, but I know that stories are inspirational and they're always fascinating to other people. I think one reason that people do not want to invest, particularly people who are looking at passive investments, the reason they're hesitant to invest in real estate is because it's not a public offering, which public offerings already have that level of trust. But if you're going into a private investment, there's a whole different level of trust. And I think you have to really, to develop that trust, you really need to know the people who are involved in the industry and certainly in the investments that you're going to go into. So that's what my show is focused upon. I want potential investors to develop a level of trust so they can feel good about stepping into passive real estate investment. David, thank you so much for being on the program today.
Thank you very much, Alan. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Enlightened investors, don't go yet. I have an important announcement. Creekside Chats is coming to a close. This is the next to the last Creekside Chats podcast. We're moving to a new platform that will be called Real Estate Investing Abundance. The new show continues to bring to life the personal stories of our guests, but puts that together with valuable investment information and insights. Please join us June 14th. You'll find us at Real Estate Investing Abundance. I look forward to meeting you there once again. That is Real Estate Investing Abundance.
Thank you for joining us on Creekside Chats with Successful Real Estate Investors, brought to you by Steed Talker Capital. For more information, as well as access to our free ebook on enhancing your well-being through real estate investing, be sure to connect with us at steedtalker.com. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steed Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine and enhance the humane treatment of horses worldwide. Steed Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures, great and small, flourish abundantly. Connect with us at steedtalker.com.